At 11:40 on a warm Tuesday night, a decorated Navy veteran was driving home from his own retirement ceremony when flashing blue lights filled his rearview mirror. 10 minutes later, he was face down on the side of the road in handcuffs, his dress uniform grinding into the gravel. And the officer who put him there had no idea he had just arrested a man who knew the law better than most attorneys. Yeah, that actually happened. The man's name was Marcus Washington, 48 years old, built like someone who had spent most of his adult life carrying gear heavier than most people's luggage. That night he wasn't doing anything dramatic, nothing heroic, nothing that would make the news. He was just driving home after closing one chapter of his life. 26 years in the Navy, most of it in special operations, the kind of career that takes you to places you can't really talk about at dinner parties. Earlier that afternoon, he had stood in a room full of sailors while an admiral shook his hand and thanked him for his service. There had been applause photographs, a folded American flag placed carefully in his hands, and that strange quiet feeling that comes when the job you've done almost your entire adult life suddenly becomes something you used to be. So, yeah, Marcus was still wearing his dress whites. Perfectly pressed metals shining under the streetlights as he drove along a quiet road outside Norfolk, Virginia. Hands on the wheel, speed right at the posted limit, mind somewhere between exhaustion and relief. Then those lights came on behind him. Now Marcus had been through 6 combat deployments. He had trained himself to stay calm in situations that would send most people into panic mode, so a traffic stop wasn't exactly intimidating. He signaled, pulled over slowly, and placed both hands on the wheel where they could be seen. Just routine. 3 minutes, maybe 5. That's what he expected. The officer who approached the vehicle was a young patrol cop named Chad Brenly, maybe 31, walking with that stiff confidence some officers carry when they've been on the job long enough to feel powerful, but not long enough to feel cautious. His flashlight moved across the inside of the SUV until it landed on Marcus's uniform. Medals, ribbons, the seal trident on his chest. Brenly paused, then said the first thing that would set everything in motion. License and registration. Marcus nodded calmly. Yes, officer. Before I reach for anything, I want to let you know I'm legally carrying a firearm on my right hip. My ID and registration are in the glove compartment. Brenly's light stayed on his chest. What's all that for? Marcus answered evenly. Those are my service decorations. I retired from the Navy today. Brenly didn't respond with congratulations or curiosity. Instead, he said something short and sharp. Step out of the vehicle. Now here's where the story really starts turning. Because Marcus Washington wasn't just some veteran who had spent his life kicking down doors overseas. 2 years before retiring, he had completed legal training through the Department of Defense. He had spent time studying constitutional law, teaching young sailors about their rights during civilian law enforcement encounters. In other words, he knew exactly what officers could legally demand and what they couldn't. So Marcus stayed calm and asked a simple question. Officer, may I ask the reason for the stop and the legal basis for asking me to exit the vehicle? Brenly leaned closer to the window. I'll ask the questions. Marcus nodded slightly. With respect, I'm not refusing anything. I'm asking a lawful question. You could almost see the moment Brenly's patience snapped. See, he was used to 2 kinds of responses during traffic stops, compliance or anger. What he got instead was calm confidence backed by legal knowledge, and that threw him completely off balance. Brenly stepped back from the SUV and spoke into his radio, requesting backup. Within a few minutes, 2 more police cruisers arrived. Now 3 officers were standing around a man who had done absolutely nothing illegal. Marcus kept his hands visible, voice steady. Officer, again, I'm asking what the reason for the stop is. Brenly's answer was colder this time. Last chance. Step out. Marcus took a slow breath. Without legal cause, I'm not required to exit the vehicle. One of the backup officers shifted uncomfortably. Another looked at Marcus's uniform more closely, like the situation suddenly didn't feel as simple as it had 5 minutes earlier. But Brenly had already decided how this was going to end. He opened the car door himself and grabbed Marcus by the arm. Now Marcus didn't swing, didn't shout, didn't threaten anyone. But his body did what decades of combat training had taught it to do. It stayed firm, just for a second. And that was enough. Brenly suddenly shouted, "Stop resisting!" The words came before any real resistance ever happened. The other officers rushed forward. Hands grabbed shoulders, arms, wrists. Marcus said loudly, clearly, "I am not resisting." But the momentum had already started. Within seconds, a decorated Navy SEAL was on the pavement in full dress uniform, gravel, pressing into his metals handcuffs, locking around his wrists. As they lifted him up and walked him toward the patrol car, Marcus said something quietly, almost like he was thinking out loud. "Officer, this is not going to stay on this road." They took him to the city jail that night and booked him on charges of resisting arrest and obstruction of justice. His booking photo showed a man still wearing his formal military uniform medals pinned neatly across his chest. And that photo traveled faster than anyone expected, because Marcus Washington wasn't just another citizen arrested during a routine stop. He was a senior enlisted leader with 26 years of service, and people noticed when something like that happened. By early morning, officers at Naval Station Norfolk had heard about the arrest. By midday, a military legal officer had contacted Marcus. By evening, he was sitting at his kitchen table with a laptop writing something that would change the entire story. Most people after a night like that would want to forget it happened. Go home, get some sleep, try to move on. Marcus didn't do that. Instead, he wrote a 47-page legal memorandum. Line by line, he documented everything that happened during the stop. The timeline, the body camera, timestamps, the specific constitutional protections involved, Fourth Amendment violations, state law regarding traffic stops, department policy regarding use of force. He cited court cases, attached evidence, organized the whole thing like a professional legal brief. When he finished, he sent copies everywhere that mattered. The police department's internal affairs office, the city attorney, the state civil rights division, the Department of Defense, and a civil rights attorney named Patricia Reed, who had built her career suing police departments that crossed the line. When Reed read Marcus's document, she reportedly said something like, "This man already built half the case." Within 36 hours, Officer Brenly was placed on administrative leave. Investigators reviewed the body camera footage from the stop, and what they saw made the situation much worse. The video showed Marcus calm and respectful from beginning to end. No threats, no aggressive movement, no refusal to cooperate. It also showed Brenly escalating the encounter without providing a legal reason for the stop. But the most damaging moment came about 7 minutes into the footage. One of the backup officers quietly told Brenly, "Just let him go." And Brenly answered with 4 words that would eventually echo across national news. "I don't care what he's wearing." When that audio became public, the story exploded. Millions of people watched the footage online. Legal experts broke down the encounter frame by frame. Veterans organizations spoke out. Civil rights groups spoke out. People argued about whether Marcus should have simply stepped out of the car to avoid escalation. Others argued that citizens should never be forced to surrender their rights just to prevent an officer's ego from being bruised. Meanwhile, the police department finished its internal investigation. Their conclusion was blunt. The traffic stop had no clear legal justification. The use of force was unnecessary. The arrest should never have happened. The department recommended termination. Brenly resigned before they could fire him. His career in law enforcement effectively ended that week. But that wasn't the end of the story. Patricia Reed filed a federal civil rights lawsuit soon after naming Brenly, the city, and the department as defendants. The case argued that Marcus's constitutional rights had been violated and that the arrest was both unlawful and discriminatory. Over the next year, the evidence stacked up quickly. The body camera footage, witness statements, legal analysis. Even previous complaints against Brenly from other citizens began resurfacing. Eventually, the city decided to settle. The exact number wasn't fully public, but court filings indicated it was close to the $20 million originally sought in the lawsuit. The department also announced a series of reforms, including new training requirements on constitutional law and traffic stop procedures. And Marcus Washington, well, he didn't just disappear quietly after the settlement. Instead, he partnered with his attorney to launch a nonprofit focused on teaching service members and veterans about their legal rights during interactions with law enforcement. In its first year alone, the program trained thousands of people across the country. When Marcus spoke about the incident later, he didn't sound angry so much as reflective. He said something during one interview that stuck with a lot of people. He said, "I spent 26 years defending the Constitution overseas. That night reminded me that understanding it here at home matters just as much." And maybe that's why this story still gets people talking. Because Marcus had everything going for him. A decorated career, legal knowledge, discipline under pressure, and it still happened to him. So here's the question I want to leave you with. If you were in Marcus Washington's position that night, would you have stepped out of the vehicle immediately just to avoid escalation, even if you believed the order was unlawful? Or would you have done what he did and calmly stood on your rights, knowing it might make the situation worse in the moment? I'm genuinely curious what you think because stories like this sit right at the intersection of law power and human judgment. Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you've ever witnessed something similar during a traffic stop or police encounter, share that too. A lot of people are listening to these conversations now, and sometimes the stories people tell are the only way real change ever starts.